Welcome to China Truths. Today we will bring you the following stories. Australia may not get AUKUS subs under alternative plan presented to U.S. Congress. U.S. lawmakers urge Japan to curb export of chip-making equipment to China. Chinese national pleads guilty in scheme to illegally export U.S. semiconductor technology to China. Suspending Canada-China committee sends the wrong message amid interference concerns. South Africa asks Taiwan to relocate de facto embassy out of the capital. Now, let's dive into the details. China Truths. Australia may not get AUKUS subs under alternative plan presented to U.S. Congress. The United States may not deliver the 3 to 5 nuclear-propelled Virginia-class submarines promised under the AUKUS deal, but instead seek to operate up to 8 of its vessels out of Australian ports. Under the alternative plan presented to Congress by the U.S. Congressional Research Service, Australia would instead spend billions of dollars on procuring other American-made defense technology. The report criticizes both countries for not undertaking a rigorous comparative analysis to examine whether Pillar 1, or nuclear submarines, would be a more cost-effective way to spend defense resources than any alternatives. The biggest impediment to the United States delivering on its promises is that it cannot build nuclear-propelled submarines fast enough. From 2011 to 2024, they have been procured at a rate of 2 per year, costing about $4.5 billion each. But since 2022, shipyard and supplier workforce and supply chain problems have limited production to about 1.2 to 1.4 subs per year, resulting in a growing backlog of subs procured but not yet built. Efforts are being made to increase production to 2 per year by 2028 and subsequently to 2.33 per year. But to achieve this, Congress has had to appropriate additional billions of dollars of funding, and just keeping up with the U.S. Navy's demands would require producing 2 subs a year through at least 2043. Adding to the pressure, the Navy has requested 2 new Virginia-class submarines by 2025, requiring additional funding. Supporters of procuring 2 boats argue that doing so would provide greater stability for the industrial base and send a stronger signal of resolve to potential adversaries such as China, the report notes. However, the report also notes that witnesses from the Department of Defense and the Navy told a hearing of the House Armed Services Committee in October 2023 that they supported Pillar 1 and backed the request for supplemental funding for the submarine industrial base. While the United States has assisted the UK's nuclear-powered submarine program since 1958, it has reportedly turned down requests from other allies, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Canada and Japan, to provide similar assistance. Pillar 1 of AUKUS would make Australia only the second country to receive United States help in naval nuclear propulsion and nuclear-powered submarines and the first country to purchase a complete nuclear-powered submarine from the United States. But it is not just construction capacity that is causing some in Congress to doubt whether Pillar 1 should go ahead. Australia's reluctance to follow the United States into conflict and its aversion to nuclear weapons are also issues. The report quotes Australian Defence Minister Richard Marles as saying in 2023 that in exchange for the Virginia-class boats, Australia's government made no promises to the United States that Australia would support it in a future conflict over Taiwan. Similarly, the chief of Australia's Navy in July 2024 reportedly stated that the AUKUS agreement would not automatically pull Australia into a war to defend Taiwan, the report said. Selling 3 to 5 Virginia-class submarines to Australia would convert them from boats that would be available for use in a U.S.-China crisis or conflict into boats that might not. The report claims this could weaken deterrence and warfighting capability in the event of potential aggression by Beijing if China were to find reason to believe, correctly or not, that Australia might use its Virginia-class boats less effectively than the U.S. Navy would use them. Similarly, Australia's commitment under the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, NPT, that its submarines would be fitted only with conventional weapons means the boats would never be armed with U.S. nuclear-armed sea-launched cruise missiles, SLCMN. This reduction in the number of SLCMN-capable Virginia-class boats could weaken rather than strengthen deterrence capability in connection with a U.S.-China or U.S.-Russia crisis or conflict, the report concludes. Pillar 1, as currently structured, will not increase the total number of nuclear-propelled submarines available for performing missions until sometime in the 2040s, when the first replacement submarine for the U.S. Navy or the first AUKUS boat for the Australian Navy, whichever comes first, enters service, it says. Instead, over the period leading up to that, it would absorb resources that could instead be invested in Australian military capabilities that could be fielded sooner, and in some cases, soon enough to address the Davidson window, the period to 2027, or decade of concern, to 2030, both terms used to describe the heightened risk of potential Chinese aggression against Taiwan over the next few years. One such alternative, canvassed by the U.S. Congressional Research Service in the report, is operating Virginia-class boats from Australia, which is something that can be done without selling the boats to Australia. Operating up to 12 U.S. Navy submarines from Australian ports, the 4 agreed under Pillar 1, plus up to 8 additional vessels, would send a strong signal of U.S.-Australian alliance solidarity and resolve, it says. Under that scenario, Australian shipyards would get to perform maintenance, overhaul, and repair work. This would see Australia spending instead on long-range anti-ship missiles, drones, loitering munitions, B-21 long-range bombers, or other long-range strike aircraft, which would be used to perform military missions for both Australia and the United States. Congress will now decide whether to formally consider the alternative outline in the report, which was authored by Ronald O'Rourke, a naval analyst with the Congressional Research Service since 1984. U.S. lawmakers urge Japan to curb export of chip-making equipment to China. Top U.S. lawmakers have urged Japan to take measures to restrict Japanese companies from selling semiconductor chip-making equipment to China in an official letter in recent days. John Molinar, a Republican from Michigan, chairman of the U.S. House of Representatives Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, and Democratic Representative Raja Krishnamurti from Illinois expressed their concerns over the flow of Japanese semiconductor manufacturing equipment to China in the letter to Japanese Ambassador to the United States Shigeo Yamada on October 15, and warned that if Japan fails to take action, Washington may put restrictions on the Japanese equipment companies and ban them from receiving U.S. semiconductor subsidies. The U.S. lawmakers rejected arguments that the restrictions on sale to China had a material negative impact on chip equipment companies such as Tokyo Electron, TEL. They said in the letter that the claim that these companies have been hurt by multilateral export controls do not appear to stand up to scrutiny. Citing the sharp rise of share prices of Tokyo Electron, ASML, Lam Research and Applied Materials, as well as billions of US dollars and euros in chip subsidy programs, the lawmakers said the company's claims of being impacted by the export controls were not particularly persuasive. However, China remains a lucrative market for all chip tool manufacturing companies, and officials in Japan and the Netherlands are reluctant to impose further export restrictions. Molinar and Krishnamurti stressed in the letter the importance of cooperation between the United States, Japan, and the Netherlands, home to 5 of the most important semiconductor tool manufacturers in the world, in slowing China's ambition to dominate the global chip market. The lawmakers said the continuing exports of U.S., Japanese, and Dutch chip manufacturing equipment to China would give Beijing a functional veto over our nation's ability to produce our weapons systems and modern consumer goods at necessary levels. They said multilateral action remains the best way to deal with the threat from China. They also said that the United States' other options include tightening subsidy rules. Once a company sells advanced chip equipment to China, it will not be able to obtain U.S. semiconductor subsidies. The U.S. unilateral measures, which have bipartisan support, also include the expansion and strengthening of the Foreign Direct Product Rule, FDPR, to ensure that any sophisticated SME machine produced with any U.S. technology in Japan or elsewhere requires a U.S. export license prior to export to the PRC, People's Republic of China. Japan hasn't publicly responded to the letter. Su Tsuyun, researcher and director of the Division of Defense Strategy and Resources at Taiwan's Institute for National Defense and Security Research, told the Epoch Times on October 19 that Japan's reluctance to restrict exports of chip-making equipment to China could be due to its huge trade deficit with China, which is continuing to expand. China has continued to purchase chip manufacturing equipment from Japan in large quantities, so the Japanese government is unwilling to take any action, Su said. Wang Xiaowen, assistant researcher at Taiwan's Institute for National Defense and Security Research, told the Epoch Times on October 19 that Japan has not officially restricted the export of semiconductor equipment to China, mainly because it is still waiting to see the results of the November 5 U.S. election. Trump and Harris may have differences in their China policies, Wang said. Also, since China currently almost has a monopoly on the production of major rare earths, Japan is also worried that the ban on semiconductor equipment will trigger China's trade retaliation on rare earths. This not only affects the production of Japanese semiconductor materials and equipment, but also affects the Japanese automobile industry. In particular, China has already stated that it will retaliate against Japan if the exports of chip-making equipment to China are restricted, she said. Molinar and Krishnamurti wrote in the letter that Beijing is actively using semiconductor equipment from the United States, Japan, and the Netherlands to establish the world's largest semiconductor manufacturing industrial base. The chip level that China is trying to dominate is the lifeblood of modern economy and modern military, forming the foundation of almost every electronic and every weapon system in circulation today. As to China's chip-making capability, Su said that it can already produce advanced 12-nanometer chips using Chinese-made chip-making equipment, although the yield rate is not good. Now, it's trying to use domestically made equipment to produce 7 nanometers, and this is the last line of defense and threshold, which is what democratic countries strive to defend, Su said. In this case, if Japan provides equipment for the CCP to mature and stabilize its 12 nanometers chip production, it will help it to focus on and further develop its ability to make 7 nanometers chips, which becomes a potential threat. Wang said that based on the closeness of the US-Japan alliance, the Japanese government would eventually follow the United States in the chip-making equipment ban. At present, the Japanese government is just seizing the time to devise more comprehensive measures, she said. Especially now, because of China's anti-Japan sentiments and the murder of a Japanese child in China, the Japanese automobile industry has begun to withdraw its investment from China. Perhaps soon, when the number of Japanese companies in China decreases, the Japanese government will start to take a tougher stance on China. Chinese national pleads guilty in scheme to illegally export U.S. semiconductor technology to China. A Chinese national on October 17 pleaded guilty to illegally exporting U.S. semiconductor equipment to a U.S. sanctioned company in China, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of California. Chen Lin, 65, admitted to knowingly attempting to buy a wafer-cutting machine with the intent to sell to a Chinese company on the Entity List, an export blacklist maintained by the Commerce Department's Bureau of Industry and Security, BIS, according to a statement issued by the Department of Justice, DOJ, on October 17. Wafer-cutting machines are precision tools used in the semiconductor manufacturing process to cut semiconductor wafers into smaller pieces. A federal grand jury indicted Chen in December 2020, charging him with conspiracy to violate the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, submitting false electronic export information, smuggling, and IEEPA violations. Under his plea agreement, Chen pleaded guilty to causing an unlawful export in violation of the IEEPA. Chen was arrested in Chicago in April and is currently released on bond. His sentence hearing is scheduled for January 28, 2025. If convicted, Chen faces a maximum prison sentence of 20 years and a fine of up to $1 million. The latest case illustrates the threats posed by China's espionage operations directed at the United States, including theft of trade secrets and intellectual property. In 2022, FBI Director Christopher Wray said his bureau was opening a new China counterintelligence investigation about every 12 hours. Chen and his co-defendant, Li Han, allegedly intended to procure a DTX-150 automatic diamond scriber breaker machine, a wafer-cutting machine, from California-based firm Dynatex International and sell it to China-based Chengdu Jiastone Technology, officials say. However, doing so legally would require an export license from the Commerce Department because Jiastone was added to the Entity List in August 2014. BIS said at the time that GA Stone was added to the list because of involvement in activities contrary to the national security and foreign policy interests of the United States. To skirt U.S. regulations, Chen and Li allegedly attempted to buy the machine in the name of a Chinese company called Jiangsu Hantang International Trade Group, which would act as an intermediary to conceal GA Stone as the true end user of Dynatex's machine, officials say. To avoid detection, Li and Chen instructed Dynatex International to ensure that the export information associated with the sale did not list Chengdu GA Stone Technology as the ultimate consignee of the shipment, federal prosecutors said. According to the plea agreement, Chen revealed that he and Li arranged the sale on December 10, 2015. Federal prosecutors said in April that they believe that Li, a Chinese national, was in China. Stopping the flow of U.S. semiconductor technology that supports the People's Republic of China's military modernization efforts is a top priority for the Office of Export Enforcement, Brent Burmester, a special agent in charge of the Commerce Department, said at the time. BIS will continue to prioritize investigations involving exports of advanced technologies to prohibited parties to protect U.S. national security. Chengdu GA Stone Technology was also implicated in another recent case. In 2023, Shi Yiqi, an electrical engineer from Los Angeles, was resentenced to 85 months in prison for conspiring to illegally export monolithic microwave integrated circuits, MICs, which are wideband, high-powered semiconductor chips with military applications. He exported MICs to China for a state-owned entity called AVIC 607. He was initially sentenced to 63 months in prison in 2021. She was the president of GA Stone, which was building an MMIC manufacturing facility in the Chinese city of Chengdu, federal prosecutors said in a 2021 statement. According to the DOJ, MICs are used in missiles, missile guidance systems, fighter jets, electronic warfare countermeasures, and radar applications. In February this year, a Chinese-born researcher was arrested for allegedly stealing trade secret technologies developed for the U.S. government to detect nuclear missile launches and to track ballistic and hypersonic missiles. Suspending Canada-China Committee sends the wrong message amid interference concerns. Deeply shocked is how diaspora groups describe their reaction to a report that the governing Liberals may suspend regular meetings of a Commons committee dedicated to studying Canada-China relations. We are deeply shocked by the recent proposal from members of your committee to suspend regular meetings, said 9 Hong Kong community groups in an October 18 joint letter citing China's increasingly aggressive interference in Canada and calling for an urgent appeal against the proposal. The groups said that, at a time when concerns are rising over Chinese interference targeting Canadians and when a public inquiry is probing Beijing's meddling in Canada's elections, this proposal sends the wrong message that the Parliament of Canada does not fully grasp the threat of China's influence. The diaspora group's letter came a week after the Globe and Mail published an article saying Liberal MPs are backing a motion that proposes to end regular meetings of the Special Committee on the Canada People's Republic of China relationship. The committee typically meets every Monday when the House is sitting. If the motion passes, meetings would convene only for urgent matters upon special request from members or when called by the chair after consulting with parties, according to the motion cited by the October 10 Globe article. Put forward by Liberal MP Nathaniel Erskine Smith, the motion received support from other Liberal committee members but was opposed by Conservative and Bloc Québécois MPs on the committee, the Globe reported. No public information was released. Liberal MP and committee chair Ken Hardy told the Epoch Times that the motion was introduced during a private meeting and as such he could not comment on the details. However, he confirmed that, if adopted, the motion would allow him, as chair, to call for meetings or for any two parties to summon the committee. Hardy said there are regular Commons standing committees with the authority and mandate to examine the issues raised by the diaspora groups. As I see it, the Canada-China Special Committee could focus on issues that, while important, cannot get onto the agendas of the standing committees, he said. Whether or not there are enough of those issues to require the continuous use of parliamentary resources is an open question at this point, he added. The Special Committee's mandate, as expressed in the original motion adopted by Parliament, is very broad, so consideration about what it should take on would reflect on the relative importance of each potential study subject. The Epoch Times reached out to other committee members for comment, including Erskine Smith, but did not hear back. The Canada-China Committee, established in 2019, has studied and produced a number of reports on key issues. These include Beijing's operation of secret police stations in Canada, its targeting of individuals and communities including diasporas for interference and intimidation, the exposure of Canadian investment to Beijing's human rights abuses, and China's suppression of democracy movements in Hong Kong. We strongly urge the Special Committee to maintain its regular meeting schedule and the vital study of Canada's relationship with the PRC. There is urgent work to be done, the diaspora group said. Canada must uphold its values by addressing human rights violations. The groups highlighted several issues that they said require the committee's attention, including participation of Hong Kong's police commissioner and police force members in a sports competition in Winnipeg, Manitoba, last August, despite widespread criticism of police violence against activists during the 2019 Hong Kong pro-democracy demonstrations. In addition to continuing to hold regular meetings, the groups urged the committee to take action to address a number of issues related to Beijing's control over Hong Kong and exploitation of the city's special status in international trade. The groups raised serious questions about the activities of the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Offices, HKETOs, in Toronto and Vancouver, noting reports earlier this year that an official from the HKETO in London was found to have been involved in espionage activities. The diaspora groups also expressed concern that the city, once an international trade hub known for its economic freedom, is being undermined and is now becoming a strategic loophole for sanctions evasion. They pointed to Hong Kong's role as a transit center for Beijing in providing high-tech products, including semiconductors and drone parts, to Russia for use in the war against Ukraine. While we appreciate Canada's ongoing concern and special immigration policies for Hong Kongers, more decisive actions are needed to protect national security and uphold Canadian values, the diaspora groups said. A thorough reassessment of relations with Hong Kong is essential. The joint statement was signed by Canada-Hong Kong Link, Vancouver Society in Support of Democratic Movement, and Friends of Hong Kong, Calgary, among others. South Africa asks Taiwan to relocate de facto embassy out of the capital. Taiwan has been asked to move its de facto embassy out of Pretoria, South Africa's government confirmed on October 18 following accusations that it was bowing to pressure from Beijing. In a statement published on October 18, South Africa's Department of International Relations and Cooperation said the Taipei Liaison Office will be rebranded as a trade office, and that it will relocate from the South African capital of Pretoria to Johannesburg, which the department called the country's economic hub. The department said that because South Africa has no formal diplomatic tie with Taiwan, the move was to correct this anomaly of having the Taiwan office in the capital city. The new arrangement will be a true reflection of the non-political and non-diplomatic nature of the relationship between the Republic of South Africa and Taiwan. The department also said the Taipei Liaison Office had been given 6 months to move. Taiwan's semi-official wire service, the Central News Agency, said the liaison office was told on October 7 to move out of the capital by the end of October or be shut down. South Africa severed its diplomatic ties with Taiwan in 1998 to establish formal relations with China. The Taiwanese Foreign Ministry said Taiwan and South Africa have since maintained good relations in areas including trade, education, and science. However, warming relations between Pretoria and Beijing were posing a challenge to Taiwan's relationship with South Africa. If the South African government still insists on submitting to China and changing the status quo, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will study and formulate all possible responses in order to safeguard the sovereignty and dignity of our country, it said in a statement. Beijing welcomed the South African ministry's move. We appreciate South Africa's correct decision to relocate the Taipei Liaison Office in South Africa out of Pretoria, the administrative capital, said China's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning. Taiwan, or the Republic of China, is the continuation of an exiled power that controlled mainland China before the communist takeover in 1949. Taipei no longer seeks control over mainland China, but absorbing Taiwan remains one of Beijing's top goals. While Beijing does not rule out annexing Taiwan by force, and has continuously patrolled and held military exercises around the island, some observers believe a military invasion is a less likely scenario. In a report published earlier this month, the Washington-based Research Institute Foundation for Defense of Democracy said that while decision-makers are focusing on the most dangerous scenarios, such as a military invasion or a blockade, the most strategic and logical approach for Beijing to realize its goal of annexing Taiwan is through a cyber-enabled economic coercion campaign.